Mr Plunkett has an application for appearance.
Your Honour, members of the Commission, I seek leave to appear for Diane Carpenter, instructed by Lorna McGill. And if leave is granted, then I also seek leave on her behalf to ask a number of questions of Bishop Heenan.
Any objection to that, Ms David, Ms Needham? Yes, I'll grant that application, Mr Plunkett.
Thank you, Honour.
I should just make note of the fact that we've had a delayed start this morning, and I know those present in the hearing room have been kept advised of the technological problems that caused the delayed start. We're advised that they were problems out of our Sydney office and that they're obviously now fixed and we're able to recommence with live streaming. So I do apologise for the delay in commencing this morning and note that we're now ready to proceed, and we're advised that the live streaming is up and running again. Thank you. So you want to proceed now, Mr Plunkett?
If it pleases the Commission. Bishop, as you've heard, I now appear for Diane Carpenter, and I have some questions to ask on her behalf. Now, you've told us that the priests in your dioceses are subject to your direction and control. Is that correct?
Correct.
They must obey a direction given by you. Now, is there any protocol in the Church about the manner in which such directions and such requirements of obedience is to be exercised?
Well, as I understand that when a priest is ordained, he makes a solemn promise to the bishop ordaining him that he will offer obedience to the bishop or his successor. So from that requirement flows the requirement that the priest obey all directions of his bishop.
Right. Now, you gave evidence about a direction you gave to Father Durham, is that so?
Yes.
All right. Now, at what point did you decide to give that direction? At what stage of appreciation of a particular situation does a bishop have to reach before he decides to exercise a specific power to give a specific direction, as you did in relation to Father Durham?
Well, the circumstance was a further allegation of sexual abuse that had come through, and that I realised that there was a need to ensure that he was away from the ministry that he was exercising at a school. So I didn't suggest to him, I directed to him that he cease that ministry.
All right. Now, in addition to the power to give a direction, do you have a power as a bishop to withdraw clerical status from a priest?
Well, I don't have that power, but the Holy Father, Pope, has that power, and a bishop can make application to the Holy Father and to the Roman congregation for the person to be laicized, yes.
Yes, and to laicise meaning that they revert to being a layperson,
yes.
And their powers as a priest,
yes,
spiritual powers, are removed.
Yes.
All right. Is that a complex process?
Well, a priest again has the right to be defended or to be heard, and therefore the process has to be fully set out by the bishop as to why he would suggest that this priest, should be laicized. So usually takes some time to process, but it's reasonably straightforward, but it doesn't happen overnight.
All right. Well, could you give us any idea of how long it takes?
Well, I think it would, depending on the circumstances, it could take 3 months, it could take more.
All right. Now, in what circumstances would a bishop make application to His Holiness the Pope to laicise a particular priest?
Well, I would imagine it would be, depending on the circumstances of why he would be considering laicization for that priest. If it were something that was he felt he lost control perhaps of that priest's life, or he wasn't giving him obedience, he might say, I need to cut the link.
Right, I imagine there might be some matters of faith about which there are disputes, inconsistent with the doctrine of the Church from Rome. Now, in the case of gross moral turpitude, that would be a ground, I imagine, for a bishop to recommend that a priest be laicized.
Certainly could be.
Conviction for a criminal offence, would that be another ground?
Could be.
Was any consideration given in relation to Father Durham after he pleaded guilty in the first instance to him being laicized?
No, not on my part, there wasn't.
And why did you not give consideration to making application after he had pleaded guilty, had been convicted and sentenced to a term of imprisonment?
Well, I think so much was happening in terms of subsequent trials, and it was probably just not something that occurred to me at that time. He was an elderly man, a very elderly man, and it didn't occur to me.
Has there been any revision among the bishops about these sorts of circumstances where a recommendation or an application may be made to Rome to have a priest laicized?
No, I'm not aware of any.
All right. Do you consider that might be a suitable undertaking for consideration by the Church if a parish priest is convicted of sex abuse against a child, that should instigate or trigger an application for the laicization of that particular priest, so found guilty?
Yes, I believe it could be.
Moving on to another topic I've been asked to seek your answers to, was there any complaints ever made, to your knowledge, about Father Michael Hayes?
No, there was not.
Right, was Father Michael Hayes stationed at Theodore at one stage?
He certainly was.
That's within your diocese?
Yes, it is.
Right. And you're not aware of any complaint about him?
No, I'm not.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honour. Those are my questions.
Thanks, Mr. Plunkett.
Leave to us to just cover two short matters.
Yes, Mr. Clergy.
Bishop Heenan, you'll remember my name is
Ms. McGlinchey, you just need to get closer to a microphone for us, please.
Bishop Heenan, my name is McGlinchey. Can you hear me now?
A little bit better, but it would be good if it was a little bit better.
Okay. Is it turned now? Yes.
That's better,
Okay.
yes.
Bishop Heenan, you'll recall I represent a number of people who were victims in these proceedings. Right. Father Durham was charged with criminal offences in 1997.
Yes.
Is that correct? Up until that time, had you disclosed to any of the Sisters of Mercy the allegations that had made to you by AYB?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Could you give it a thought?
Well, I'd have to know if the sisters had told me and they hadn't.
No. You were aware from 1994 and had many conversations with AYB about sexual abuse of her by Father Durham.
Yes.
Had you disclosed that to any of the Sisters of Mercy?
I don't believe so. I may have, but I don't recall doing so.
Is it the case that, unless they heard it from another source, the Sisters of Mercy may have first heard that Father Durham was an abuser of children in 1997 when he was charged?
Is possible, yes.
Did you ever give consideration to disclosing those matters to the Sisters of Mercy?
No, I didn't.
Do you think it would have been appropriate that you did?
Well, the reality was that Father Durham wasn't being charged at the request of AYB, as I understood it, and therefore, but as I've said several times now, when I look back, I would have done things differently. and I regret that, but I would have surely spoken to the sisters about it.
Father Durham died in 2002, correct? And you supported him up until that time, up until the time of his death, in a pastoral sense?
Yes, and supported in the sense that he was one of the priests of the diocese, yes.
When he did pass away, were you involved with the arrangements for his funeral?
I would have known the arrangements. I would have been present.
Were you present at his funeral? Did you speak at his funeral?
No, I didn't.
Were you party to arrangements to pay for, say, the headstone?
I don't know that, but I would imagine that the diocese would have been prepared to do that.
Do you know what is on Father Durham's headstone?
Not offhand.
I'll just pass up a photograph of Father Durham's headstone. I'm sorry I don't have copies, Commissioner. I only became aware of this morning. You agree that that's Father Durham's headstone?
I can't identify it. There's no name that I can see there.
No name, but, well, actually, will you go to the next page?
I'm sorry. Yes, that would be his headstone, yes.
And you'll note on the second page that Father Durham was buried with his full title, because as you've told my friend, there was no process of defrocking him.
Yes, yes.
All right. Can you read what was on the headstone on the first page that I showed you?
Yes, I can see that from the Book of the Apocalypse.
Can you read it, please?
Thou hast made us a royal priesthood to serve God.
Who would have made the decision to put those words on the headstone?
I do not know the answer to that question. It wasn't myself. I don't know where that quotation or why it was put there.
Do you think it's an appropriate quotation given what was known about Father Durham by 2002?
No, I can see it could be inappropriate, yes.
You would have seen that inscription on the headstone before today?
I don't recall seeing it, but I'm sure it was there.
You would agree that it is offensive to Father Durham's victims?
I can understand that.
I invite Council Assisting to tender the photographs. I have nothing further.
Do that.
.19. Ms. Needham.
Please, Your Honour and Commissioners. Bishop Heenan, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am.
As you know, I'm counsel representing the Truth, Justice and Healing Council, the Diocese of Rockhampton, and the Institute of the Sisters of Mercy for Australia and Papua New Guinea. Now, I'd like to ask you some questions about your knowledge of Neerkol and the work done by the sisters at Neerkol prior to your first knowing of the allegations of abuse there. So can you cast your mind back to the years between becoming the Bishop of Rockhampton and mid-1993 and tell Her Honour and the Commissioners what you knew of the work done at Neerkol by the sisters?
Well, I understood that the orphanage had been in existence for a period of 100 years, and that there were probably 4,000 young people who passed through the orphanage, and my understanding at that time when I came and in those early years was that it had been a very positive place for the care of children. I knew some of the past residents, I knew some of the sisters, I knew some of the people who used to visit there in support, and my general impression was it was a positive experience for the students, for the residents there. I'm sure I understood it wasn't an easy place for them, but generally speaking, my impression was a positive one.
So when you first heard from AYB of allegations of sexual abuse by priests at Neerkol, did that come as a shock to you?
It certainly did.
Now, you recall receiving her letter on the 1st of June 1993, and perhaps tender bundle tab 25 could be shown to the Bishop. You'll recall that AYB said quite directly that she had rather a traumatic time as she was sexually abused for a number of years by one of the priests. And that will come up on your screen.
Yes.
Now, I think that was the first time which you had heard of sexual abuse by priests at Neerkol, is that correct?
Was.
And I think in your answers to questions by learned senior counsel assisting, Ms David, you agreed with the proposition that AYC's allegations in her book earlier that year included allegations of sexual abuse by priests. Do you recall that?
I do.
Do you now accept that there were other allegations of sexual abuse but not by priests in relation to AYC's book?
Yes, I can understand that, accept that.
So AYB's complaint, her story of, sorry, I don't mean story in a negative sense, but her account of being abused by a priest at Neerkol was the first time you had contact, direct or otherwise, of somebody who had told you of such abuse.
Yes.
And you met her later that year. And what was the approach that you took to her complaints of that abuse?
As I understood, the complaints were not directly related to Neerkol. They were related to a parish situation in which AYB had been. And I accepted what AYB said. And I also understood that AYB did not want a process of charging or having this priest found accountable to go ahead. So I simply kept that as a confidence with AYB. Yes.
Did you find her story genuine?
Did.
And you believed what she was telling you at that first meeting with her?
I did.
And did you have an ongoing discussion with her over the years about her abuse?
I believe I did, because AYB's family were known to me, and I was trying to help in the whole situation with AYB. And so, yes, I did continue some dialogue there.
And at any time did your belief in her allegations waver?
Not at all.
Now, you were asked some questions about the timing of meeting with AYB and the fact that you organised a meeting between her and Father Durham. I'll just ask you to hold those events in your mind. You were asked some questions about whether it was the appropriate thing to do, in effect, to organise a meeting between AYB and Father Durham. Now, firstly, at whose request was that meeting organised?
That request came from AYB.
And were you happy to accommodate that request?
I was.
And did you ensure that she had adequate support at that meeting?
Well, I believe, if I didn't ensure it, I believe AYB made sure that there was good support there for her.
And who came to support her at that meeting?
So I can mention that name.
I think you can. She's somebody who works for the Brisbane Archdiocese, is that right?
If I may, it was Mylene Carrick.
Yes, you can mention that name.
Sure.
And she is, what was her role at the Archdiocese at that point?
Well, I think she was the coordinator for responding to sexual abuse in the Archdiocese of Brisbane at that time.
And she was, and Father Hines, who was your contact person, also attended that meeting?
Yes.
Now, did you have any feedback from AYB about whether that meeting was beneficial to her or not?
I believe her expression was that it was beneficial, that it was a moment for her to, first of all, confront that priest, but also I got the impression that she was relieved that it came out into the open between them what had happened.
Now, in February 1994, AYB wrote you a letter, and if tab 32 of the tender bundle could be brought up. You were asked some questions about delays in meeting AYB, and I think you said in your evidence that AYB didn't live in Rockhampton,
yes,
and she only came to Rockhampton on occasions.
yes.
Did you ever receive any complaints from AYB that she felt, after the first two letters that she'd written you, that she felt you weren't responding quickly enough to her needs?
Now, after the first complaint, a legitimate one, which I hadn't responded to the first letter, and then when we did meet, I don't believe I had any further complaints.
Right, and if you look at the letter at tab 32, you'll see the first paragraph indicates that for her, she felt that the timing was perfect. Was that something that reflected your experience at the time?
Yes, it was.
Now, you were also asked some questions about the development of the protocol in 1994, and that's at tab 37. Perhaps that could be brought up. And you asked some questions about whether that developed into Towards Healing. Was that an earlier version of Towards Healing, or was it a separate process from Towards Healing?
No, I believe it was a separate process, but it was overtaken by the National Towards Healing protocol.
And this was a response specific to the Bishops of Queensland, is that correct?
Yes.
And not the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference?
Yes, that's correct.
And that response came some years later?
Yes.
And this was, the document you see before you is one side of a brochure. Was that distributed throughout Queensland, as far as you're aware?
As far as I'm aware, it was.
And was that a document which enabled persons with allegations of sexual abuse against both priests and lay workers within the church to come forward and contact Father Hines?
Yes, it was an invitation to do that if people had allegations.
And as I've said, that extended not just to priests but also to teachers, employees, other workers on behalf of the church.
Yes.
And Father Hines' telephone number was given.
Yes.
And I think you appointed Father Hines in 1994, you said in your statement. From this pamphlet, that would have been earlier in 1994 than June, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think so, yes.
And could you tell the Commissioners the qualities that you observed in Father Hines that made him appropriate to be the contact person for the diocese?
Father Hines was the Vicar General of the diocese at that time, which meant that he was the person who supported me principally, but also was in charge of the diocese. If I was away, he canon law qualifications, and would have been quite a senior priest who has spent his whole life in the diocese and would have been very fully respected as a person of not only character but of judgment.
And do you understand that he received complaints on your behalf in response to this protocol?
Yes, I do.
Now, you were asked some questions by Senior Counsel Assisting about what you were doing in 1994 to support those who had suffered child sexual abuse. And you were asked those questions in the context of the allegations that had come to you, but also more generally. Do you recall those questions?
Yes.
Now, one of the things you were doing was being involved with the Queensland bishops in developing this protocol. Is it the case that this protocol is an acceptance that sexual abuse that allegations of sexual abuse against priests and other people working in the church was a real issue for the church in the early to mid-90s?
Yes, it was.
And that something needed to be done?
Yes.
And provision of a means of taking those complaints to the church was one way of responding to those complaints?
Yes, that's true.
And we've talked about the appointment of Father Hines. Did you also offer support to people who approached you directly, such as AYB?
Yes, I believe I did.
And just as one example, there's at tab 45 of the bundle, perhaps that could be brought up. This is a letter from Mylene Carrick, who by then was dated the 12th of April 95, who was then the Programs Director of the Catholic Social Response. Do you know what Catholic Social Response was?
I believe it was the Centrecare social welfare agency for the Archdiocese of Brisbane and any related areas in social welfare.
And that is a letter from Mrs. Carrick to Father Noel Hines, providing information about David Owen.
Yes.
And there's no need to go to it, but attached to that letter is Mr. Owen's personal account of his abuse as assisted by a psychologist. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that was forwarded by Mrs. Carrick to Father Noel in 1995. And if the letter at tab 46 could be brought up. And that is a letter, is that 46? It's the document CTJH 200. Is there? Sorry, yes, it is there. That letter is a letter in Father Hines' handwriting, is it?
Yes, that's correct.
To Mr. Owen. And he would have been, in that case, acting on your behalf, is that right?
Correct.
Seeking, letting Mr. Owen know that if he needed anything or if Father Hines could offer him support, just to approach him.
Yes.
And was that the kind of service that Father Hines provided in those early years?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
And are you aware of other persons who were reached out to by Father Hines?
No, I can't offhand think of anybody.
Okay. But it wasn't restricted to Mr. Owen?
Not at all, no.
All right, one of the other things that was done on behalf of the diocese was the development... I'm sorry, I withdraw that. Was the provision of training and support to the diocese by external experts, is that right?
Yes, correct.
And in 1996, you engaged Dr. Robert Grant. Do you recall what his qualifications were, without needing to be too specific?
The qualification was, I think, arising from the reality of sexual abuse in America, and he was there to help explain it to the priests, I guess, first of all, and other people, the nature of the abuse and the nature of response, and generally an understanding of sexual abuse.
And he came out to speak to both members of the diocese and the sisters, yes, in February 1997.
Yes.
And that was something that was done in tandem with the Sisters of Mercy.
Yes.
Now, you also established a resource group, Professional Standards Resource Group, in 1997, is that correct? And is that one of the requirements of adherence to the Towards Healing Protocol?
Yes, the Towards Healing Protocol, applying to almost all of Australia, suggested that there would be a state coordinator, and in each of the dioceses there would be a Towards Healing or resource group set up to work with the bishop to deal with allegations of the reality of sexual abuse.
And before I move on to the meetings of that resource group, just one question arising out of the Towards Healing process as related to the witnesses in this case. You heard AYB tell of her largely negative experience with a psychiatrist who spoke to her in relation to Towards Healing.
I did.
And was that a psychiatrist who was arranged by the diocese?
Could you just repeat that again?
Sorry, was that a psychiatrist who was arranged by the diocese?
No, it was not. It was.
Who arranged that?
It would have been arranged through Catholic Church Insurance, who had, as I understand, a request or a requirement that the situation that was being requested of them, if it was for financial support, would have some idea of the status of the person making the request.
And you recall AYB's evidence that you had told her that she wouldn't need to go into all the gory details during the Towards Healing process. Do you recall that evidence?
I do recall that, and I believe that at the time.
And is that a reflection of one of the tenets of Towards Healing, which seeks to minimise the number of times which a person needs to tell their story?
I believe it is.
And were you unhappy to find out that that had not been part of the outcome for AYB through this process?
I was, because I understood the distress of AYB having been put through a terrible ordeal.
Now, as part of the Towards Healing process, you set up the Professional Standards Resource Group.
Yes.
And the first meeting of that body was on the 6th of May 1997. And did you attend that meeting?
Yes, I believe I did.
And the second meeting, which you also attended, was on the 6th of June 1997. Do you recall that meeting? Not specifically, but do you recall you attended that meeting?
I do recall that I attended almost all of the meetings.
Yes. The matters which are... Sorry, the minutes of the Professional Standards Resource Group meeting, which are in the bundle, do reflect that you attended those meetings. And is it the case that, to your recollection, you missed one of those meetings in between 1997 and 1999?
Yes, that would be true.
And is it the case that there was a bishop's input agenda item on some of those, or some or all of those meetings?
There usually was.
And you had a significant role to play in relation to the conduct of those Professional Standard Resource Group meetings?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. Now, moving on to another topic. I'm sorry. Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, I'm indebted. Now, some of the other things that you undertook in relation to your support and outreach to persons who've suffered child sexual abuse within the diocese included a series of public conversations on sexual abuse within the church, and that took place in 2002. Do you recall where they were held?
Well, they were held in the 6 major centres of the diocese: Bundaberg, Rockhampton, Mackay, Emerald, and Longreach, possibly Billawheeler too, I think. Yes.
And so where?
Billawheeler also, I think. There were 6 centres where we conducted those conversations.
And what happened at those conversations within the diocese? Can you give an example of how those meetings would have unfolded?
As I recall, the purpose was, first of all, to make the whole of our people involved aware of sexual abuse, because there was so much disbelief and there was so much this feeling of disgrace about what had happened, and therefore we needed to say to the people, this is the reality, and we needed to say to the people, this is an opportunity for you to talk about it, because people were talking about it. And we also needed it as an opportunity for people to come forward who would feel free to come forward if they wish to report sexual allegations of any kind.
And were those meetings both the provision of information and also listening to people who had things to say?
Yes, I believe so.
And were they well attended?
Well, it depended on the bigger cities. Of course, they were. They were very big meetings in the major cities on the coast, much smaller inland. And people, I think, believed that they were helpful, and that they were positive signs that we were trying to respond to the horror of sexual abuse.
And in paragraph 137 of your statement, you go through a number of steps, including the development of the protocol and the appointment of Father Hines and the conversations. And they're just some of the ones I've dealt with now, are just some of the steps that you took in bringing forward to the diocese the ability of the diocese to respond and the willingness of the diocese to respond.
Yes, that's correct.
And you appointed Margie Newton, who was a social worker in June 1997, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what was her role?
Well, her role was to be the contact person to to receive and to support people making sexual abuse, and to become part of our Towards Healing group, so that person could help us in our understanding and our response to the allegations.
And Ms Newton was also the response coordinator for the Sisters of Mercy.
Yes.
And so there was some unanimity in the way that you and the sisters tried to approach the problem.
Yes, there was.
By having the same response coordinator, by sharing information.
Yes, it was true.
And by learning from what worked and what didn't from what the other one did. Is that correct?
I think that was true, yes.
Now, moving on to another topic, you were asked some questions by my learned friend Mr Kernaghan about your support of people who made allegations through the court system, and you were asked some questions about what you have done to support those people who were complainants in court. Is it the case that you gave police statements in AYB and AYE's criminal matters?
Yes, it is.
And if the document, have they got this one? Document CTJH 200 01134 0010 could be put up on the screen. So while we're waiting for that to come up, did you give those statements voluntarily to the police?
I certainly did.
And were you happy to assist them in their criminal investigations?
Yes, I was.
And what there's the document that I referred to earlier. That is the document entitled Summons of a Witness, and that, would you agree, is a summons to you to give evidence at a criminal prosecution. Was that in relation to Father Durham?
Yes, it was, yes.
And in relation to AYB's matter?
Yes, I think so.
And Do you recall whether you had to give evidence or not?
I don't believe I gave evidence.
But you would have been willing to do so had you been called upon?
Certainly would.
Now, you're asked some questions about the nature of a bishop's duty to support his priests. Can you tell the Commission how that duty intersects with duties under the criminal law and other duties which might arise to provide assistance in criminal prosecutions such as under the summons? It's a rather complex question. I can rephrase it if you like.
Would you please?
Yes, I will. You were asked some questions about a bishop's duty to support his priests. Do you recall those?
Yes, yes.
And you were asked some questions about the lengths that you would go to support a priest. Does that duty to support a priest preclude you from supporting the police when they are investigating a priest for criminal activity?
No, it certainly didn't, and it couldn't, and it didn't, because the criminal misbehaviour is the work of the law, and it would have been my position, always would be, to support whatever was needed to assist that process of prosecution.
And indeed, the summons that you received and the statements you gave were to assist in the prosecution of Father Durham?
They were.
Not in his defence?
They were.
Now, you were also asked a number of questions about your letter of the 24th of September 1996, and you recall those questions? You were asked some questions by senior counsel assisting about the effect that letter might have had on people who had been abused.
Yes.
And whether they were more likely to come forward or not. Do you recall those questions?
Yes, I do.
And I'll read a series of 2 questions to you and just ask you a couple of questions arising out of that. And these appear at...
Yes, go on.
From the transcript, page 7613 to 4, and they're questions by learned senior counsel assisting. And at the bottom of page 7613, you were asked, in relation to the letter of the 24th of September and people coming forward, implicit in that is that you will not have the support of the church. Do you agree with that? You will not be believed. Do you agree with that? And your answer was no, I don't believe it was that far extended. I know it's not, on the evidence, it's not looking as though people would be believed, but I didn't intend for that to be the situation. And then you're asked, at page 7614, it wasn't the case that as part of protecting the reputation of the church, you were trying to prevent or disincline people from coming forward with these allegations. And you answered, well, it certainly could be true. Do you remember those questions and answers? Was your answer, well, it could be true, intended to suggest that that was part of your intention in writing the letter to stop people coming forward?
No, it was not my intention in writing the letter to have that effect. It was, when I said it could be possible, I believe I meant that people could interpret it that way. But the last thing I intended to do was to discourage or prevent people coming forward to bring forth abuse allegations, and if that harmed the name of the church, well, so be it. It must have been.
And in fact, in your letter of the 24th of September, you said, I am fully conscious that when individual allegations of abuse are made, they must be investigated, and both the sisters and the diocese will give every assistance to the appropriate authorities, for justice must be done. And was that an invitation for people to make those complaints so that they could be heard?
I believe it was, because we were trying by that stage to be as open as and accepting as possible.
Now, do you recall AYB contacting you and expressing her upset with that letter?
Yes, I do.
Did she do that in fairly strong terms?
Yes, she did.
And did you accept that she was fully entitled to express that view in such strong terms?
I certainly did, because I understood where AYB was coming from, and I did accept that she was very upset.
Now, you wrote to her on the 30th of October 1996, if Tender Bundle tab 81 could be brought up. And in that letter, you referred to her upset and offered her an explanation. Do you recall that letter?
I do.
And if you go down to the last paragraph on the first page, you say, in your letter, you say, "I never believed a word you said to me." And then you go on to say, the fact, I think you've left out the word "is," that I accepted your statements on your first visit to my office, that I was partly responsible for and strongly encouraging of your meeting with Mylene, Reg and Noel, I think that should be Hines.
Yes.
It surely indicates that I accepted what you shared with me. Now, does that letter set out the fact that, as you've said to me earlier, your belief in AYB had never wavered?
It certainly does.
And certainly the letter of the 24th of September was not intended to was not intended to shake that belief.
No, it was not.
And that was the case for the other people to whom you'd spoken by that time as well, is that right?
It was.
Now, that letter was written the next month after the letter of September, wasn't it? Some 4 or 5 weeks later.
Sorry, I missed
I'm
that.
sorry. That letter of the 30th of October was only a month or so after the letter of September.
Yes, it was.
Now, you also, Tender Bundle 178, wrote a letter to David Owen, and that was a personal apology to him for the terms in which you wrote in September 1996. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And you said to Mr. Owen that you didn't have the understanding of the complexities of the Neerkol situation of that time. And you said, "I did not know of the immense hurt people were suffering. I tried to listen to you then, but must have not heard truly of your pain. I'm trying now to listen more carefully to what people are telling me about their hurts, and I'm trying to understand that more fully." Now, looking at that letter, does that express some of the journey which you've been on from not understanding how people would feel about their past of abuse to where you are today of having more of an understanding?
Yes, it certainly does, because it was for me a learning journey, and it's only because of my meeting with and contact with the victims, the survivors, that I was able to learn, and I was regretful for the past lack of understanding, but I believe I did grow in my understanding.
And was part of that journey of learning, and I think Mr. Owen's letter up on screen now arose out of this, was part of that journey of learning, meeting the residents of the Neerkol Action Support Group?
Yes, it certainly was.
Now, you asked some questions about your attendance at that meeting, at those meetings, and whether you were invited to attend or not. The action group was formed, do you agree, in May 1997?
Yes, I believe so.
And did you become aware of the forming of that action group?
Yes, I would have become aware of it, but I wasn't involved.
Did you have any discussions with the Sisters of Mercy about what was happening at that action group?
I don't recall that, but it's possible that it happened.
And it was the case that you were invited.
We first brought you Mohammed.
The meeting of the 23rd of September. Is that correct?
Yes.
So there was some time in between the formation of the group and when you were invited to come and be a part of it.
Yes.
And in that time, there'd been a couple of meetings at the Children's Commission with an independent mediator and working with the Sisters of Mercy, in particular on the wording of their apology. Is that correct? Now, you were asked on the 2nd of August 97 by Mary Adams to be a guest at that upcoming meeting. And on the 12th of August, you wrote her a letter, which is tab 147, sending an apology for your non-attendance. Now, you said you had a prior engagement in Mackay. Have you had the opportunity to go back and look at your diary for that period?
Yes, that was correct. I was in Mackay at that time.
And what was the kind of visit that you would have been undertaking in Mackay, to the best of your ability after so many years?
Well, that was my practice, to visit every parish in the diocese every year. Those visits would have been arranged at the end of the previous meeting. So the parishes in Mackay that I was visiting that weekend would have known that I was coming for possibly 4 days or 5 days to share with them all the ministries, all the celebrations, the schools. And so it would have been something which they had been preparing for and that I was sort of engaged to be part of with them.
So it wasn't just one other meeting you had in Rockhampton, or it was a significant period of meetings with a number of people?
It was.
Now, there was a further, at that meeting in September of the action group with the Sisters of Mercy, there were some resolutions about the apology of the Sisters of Mercy, and you understand that that apology was published between the meeting which you couldn't attend and the meeting which you did attend in December. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you attended a meeting of the 2nd of December 1997.
Yes.
And again, you were told in no uncertain terms by a number of people that they were unhappy with your letter of the 29th of September.
That's correct, yes.
And again, do you accept the validity of those complaints about the terms of that letter?
I certainly do. I certainly do.
And I think, in fact, you took the minutes of that meeting, which is Tender Bundle tab 174. Which I shall just find. And you'll see that a number of committee members attended that meeting, as did you, as did Sister Diane Allen,
Yes.
the Children's Commissioner, and the committee members and various legal advisors for parties.
Yes, I can see that.
And this is a document at which your name appears at the end. So do you recall taking those minutes?
Yes, I would have taken them.
Now, you say that the mood of the meeting was agitation and anger. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And you set out in those minutes a number of complaints about the letter of the 24th of September. And on the second page, it's noted that, again, the question of your belief in the validity of their allegations was questioned. Now, you then asked, and I'm looking at the fourth paragraph down, and you said to the members of that meeting, I asked them to tell me what they would want of me and the diocese.
Yes.
Now, was that a response to the anger and agitation that you felt in the room?
Yes, it was, and it was as a result of the contents of my letter, obviously, yes. Yeah.
And they responded that they would like a formal apology negotiated with them and published through the diocese and the Catholic leader.
Yes.
And you were able to commit to doing that?
I was.
But in the interim, you provided the document at Tender Bundle 177, and that will come up in a second, but that was the day after the meeting of the action group.
Yes.
And you provided an apology noting that you supported the sisters in their response and particularly apologising for the letter in September 1996.
Yes, that's correct.
And that was one of the ways in which you responded to the anger of the residents about that letter.
Yes, it was.
Now, the next meeting of the action group was intended to be the last meeting, is that correct? Do you recall that?
Yes, I believe.
And the agenda, which appears at Tender Bundle tab 190, includes, as item number 4, the apology by yourself and that of the Diocese of Hampton.
Yes.
Now, unfortunately, you were unable to attend that meeting personally. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
I think you said you were fogged in at Rockhampton.
Yes.
But you attended by telephone.
Yes.
And
Mr. John Shaw was there with me. We were travelling down, but no planes flew this morning.
So, attending by letter, did you, with the members who attended that meeting, settle the terms of the apology that you put out on behalf of the diocese and yourself personally later in February 98?
Yes.
And that document is at Tender Bundle 183. Perhaps that could be brought up. So this is the apology which you issued in February 98, and this was negotiated or composed with reference to the concerns of the residents of the action group. Is that?
And with their agreement.
And with their agreement.
Yes, yes.
And that contains some of the apology from the 3rd of December about the letter of the 24th of September. And in the 3rd paragraph, you say, having heard of these experiences, I am better able to understand and acknowledge the real suffering you endured and which continues now. Again, is that part of the progress which you were taking in listening to the residents, taking on board what they had to say and reformulating your response to them?
Yes, I believe it was, because I was learning much.
And part of that response, again, was the commitment that you made along with the sisters and the diocese to support the action group in their aim to seek healing. Is that right?
Yes.
And while not everything that has been undertaken from that point onwards has been unanimously successful, do you feel that you have taken steps on behalf of yourself and the diocese when you were bishop to come to a point where you were able to assist some people in that?
I believe so.
And indeed, you've heard a couple of the witnesses in this case study say that your role has been, after initial difficulties, positive to them.
Yes, I think so.